This is Mac OS Ken.
A look at iPhone growth in Southeast Asia. The EU has designs on Apple's battery. And what would you do with an Apple Vision Pro? It is Tuesday, the 20th of June, 2023. I'm Ken Ray, and this is news from Mac OS Ken, brought to you by yours truly and sponsored by Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit. Use code MacOSCan50 at factormeals.com/MacOSCan50 for 50% off your first box. This show is also supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/MacOSCan. The big story during Apple's March quarter earnings call was growth in emerging markets. Now a piece from the site Rest of World digs into that growth in Southeast Asia. Let's circle back first to that call and some comments from Apple CEO Tim Cook and CFO Luca Maestri. Emerging markets was the theme with which the execs wanted analysts to walk away. In his opening statement on that call about Apple's business in general, CEO Cook said he and his were pleased with the performance they saw in emerging markets and that they achieved all-time records in Mexico, Indonesia, the Philippines, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and the UAE, as well as a number of March quarter records, including in Brazil, Malaysia, and India. Additionally, CFO Maestri said iPhone set March quarter records in several developed and emerging markets, including Indonesia. For its part, Rest of World seems to have taken the growth as a given. The question it sought to address this week: how did that growth come about? First, Apple has increased its footprint. In May, the piece points out, Apple launched its first official online store in Vietnam. In March, Indonesian electronics brand Era Jaya, also a major licensed reseller of Apple products in the country, opened a premium partner-level store in Jakarta, which offers a customer experience close to that of the official Apple Store. One 28-year-old project manager at a nonprofit in Jakarta said iPhone's quality, the fact that she'll be able to use it for years, and the decent deal from an e-commerce site all made her iPhone 13 worth buying. Continuing that theme, the site says young professionals who had switched from Android to iOS in the past 12 months told Rest of World that they were wooed by the phone's superb camera and build and its intuitive operating system. They said they would continue to buy iPhones as long as the quality of the brand held. While Chinese smartphone makers like Oppo, Vivo, Xiaomi, and others have sailed in at a more palatable price point, often topping out at about $500, Rest of World says Apple has been making strides in Indonesia on the strength of its product quality and the rising wealth of Southeast Asia as a whole, even through the uncertainty of the pandemic. It's not that Apple's not playing with pricing as well, they're just not doing it quite as openly. The piece indicates that Apple, for the past several years, has been working on ways to sell to an audience that had premium tastes without being necessarily elite, creating bundled programs with local operators, and introducing installment payment plans. Status plus savings seems to equal growth for iPhone. Glenn Cordoza, senior analyst at Counterpoint Research, tells Rest of World, a lot of consumers in the emerging economy start with lower budget phones, but as they progress economically, many consumers purchase iOS because they have a certain status. And that has led to something we have seen around the globe for iPhone: growth where others have faltered. Rest of World highlights numbers from Counterpoint. Those indicate that for the first 3 months of this year versus 2022, Apple was the only smartphone maker to grow sales in Southeast Asia. Apple might have to make iPhone batteries easier for users to replace. That is part of the headline of a 9 to 5 Mac piece covering new rules proposed by the European Union. Under guidelines approved this month, the report has the EU indicating that portable batteries, such as those used in the iPhone, iPad, and Mac, must be easy for users themselves to replace. The exact language specifies that consumers should be able to easily remove and replace them, but without any further clarification. So what are we saying? Easy like my old IBM laptop from the year 2000? Or easy like with this toolkit and steady hands? Sadly, that lands us in that without any further clarification zone. The EU says the point is to make batteries more sustainable, more durable, and better performing. If the user can just take them out and replace them, though, wouldn't that make the batteries... There are also new proposals regarding waste collection, materials reclamation, and rules for electric car batteries. There's also plenty of time for all this to change. As currently planned, says 9 to 5 Mac, any such requirements would not be put into place until 2027 at the earliest. There are also a few more hurdles to jump before the rules are officially official. Of course, Apple can be expected to argue that its batteries are easy to remove and replace, thanks to the company's self-service repair program. The company can also be expected to fight the proposed rules should the EU offer a witty rejoinder like, "You call that easy?" 8 years later, why can users not have third-party faces for Apple Watch? I've always assumed the answer to be, because Apple says so. While technically true, the company says there are also technological reasons for that refusal. A piece from Mac Rumors had Kevin Lynch, Apple's VP of Technology and one of the heads of Apple Watch, and Apple product marketing exec Deirdre Caldbeck speaking with a Swiss newspaper. That had Lynch explaining that Apple sort of future-proofs the faces it makes. According to the report, Lynch said Apple puts a huge amount of effort into every watch face to ensure they work uniformly and simply, and said Apple needs to plan ahead to make sure watch faces continue to work if we want to change something or add new possibilities. Meanwhile, Caldbeck talked about the complications developers can add in watchOS. She also pointed out that the new Smart Stack widgets coming in watchOS 10 will offer space for up to 3 complications. Not a satisfying answer necessarily, but an answer nonetheless. More news in a moment, but first a word from Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit and sponsor of today's show. I'm going to tell you about a discussion I was part of yesterday. Back channel thing with a bunch of podcasters who have had Factor as a sponsor. Now, this wasn't a sponsored message. We weren't on anybody's podcast or anything. We weren't talking with anybody from Factor. We were just talking about them and raving about them. Maybe you think I'm just saying what I say because they pay me. And yes, I am happy to have Factor as a sponsor. But the stuff I tell you about how great Factor meals taste, how quick and easy they are to prepare, how you can save money over takeout and still enjoy great meals, when it's just a bunch of us shooting the breeze, we still talk about how great Factor is to us. Try it yourself and see what you think. Head to factormeals.com/macOSCan50 and use code macOSCan50 to get 50% off your first box. That's macOSCan50 at factormeals.com/macOSCan50 to get 50% off your first box. Taste what has made Factor America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit. Get 50% off your first box with code macOSCan50 at factormeals.com/macOSCan50. 50. Before and after the announcement of Apple Vision Pro, a lot of people puzzled over what the device's killer app would be. I argued, and still do, that we have no way of knowing until developers start developing and users start putting it through its paces. A day or so after the keynote, I got an email from a listener that I flagged, noted, and proceeded to digitally misplace. Then I found it, and it sort of illustrates my argument. Bernard wrote, saying, "Just an opinion on the headset from somebody that doesn't game or have any interest in anything AR or VR. I own a renovation company, and some projects take 5 to 7 guys, 1 to 2 days to fully capture the measurements of a large home. We use phones, iPads, laptops, LiDAR, and a whole toolbox to not only capture the design and colors, but also turn it into a set of drawings and 3D models. It is my belief that with the right software, the headset could pay for itself on every project, saving each client $5,000 and 2 weeks per design and drawing if we can just walk through and capture all measurements and colors and build a model. This is such a game changer. I am very excited about the potential." So says Bernard. Yeah, I'm thinking this thing's going to be big, and the smaller versions that follow are going to be bigger. I'm also curious whether anybody else has had an aha moment around the headset. Is there some use case you've thought of, like the surgeon we heard about yesterday, or the potential work Bernard sees Vision Pro doing for his team? Write to me and tell me what it is. info@macosken.com. I will do my best to not lose your response. And thank you for your patience, Bernard, and for writing in. You rock. And finally today, Apple is at it again, suing another organization for using an apple in their logo, even though the other organization is not a tech company, and the apple in the other logo looks like an apple, but not Apple's apple. I say at it again because they've done it before. Most egregiously, if you ask me, which you did not, in 2008, when Apple sued New York City, aka the Big Apple, over a logo for that city's Green NYC recycling initiative. They both look like apples, but only one looked like Apple's apple, if you ask me, which you did not. As a trademark owner, a piece from Apple Insider points out, Apple is required to contest all challenges to its famous mark. That article uses as an example Apple's filing against developers of the Prepare app for using a pear logo that was more than slightly reminiscent of Apple's Apple logo. That time, I personally thought Apple was in the right. But again, you did not ask me. Apple Insider says Fruit Union Suisse is an association that's been promoting the interests of Swiss fruit growers for over 100 years. For most of that time, according to the agency's director, it has used a logo of a red apple with a white cross on it. Kind of like that flag from that country. Can't think the name of it. Maybe it'll come to me. Oh yeah, Switzerland. For the past 6 years, according to Apple Insider, Apple has been trying to get the apple and the Fruit Union Suisse logo out of that logo. In comments to Wired, the organization's director said, "We have a hard time understanding this case with Apple because it's not like they're trying to protect their bitten apple. Their objective here is really to own the rights to an actual apple, which, for us, is something that is really almost universal. That should be free for everyone to use." Well, that feels like a stretch, if you ask me, which you did not. But going after a fruit-selling organization that's been an organization since before Steve Wozniak's parents were born, that also feels like a stretch, if you ask me, which you did not. Anyway, the wrangling began in 2017. Apple was awarded some of the marks it sought in Switzerland in 2022. The rest are said to be still under review by the Swiss body that governs such things. What's unclear is, why is Fruit Union Suisse commenting on this now? Maybe they're just doing their job, raising awareness of fruit. I do want an apple all of a sudden. Lowercase a. macOS Ken, brought to you by me and sponsored by Factor. Use code MacOSKen50 at factormeals.com/MacOSKen50 for 50% off your first box. This show is also supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/MacOSKen. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media, online at backbeatmedia.com. You can reach me a couple of ways. Info at macosken.com or call 716-780-4080. Until next time, that is news from macOS Ken. I'm Ken Ray.
Cha.